welcome everyone. We still have some people coming through, and we'll give it a couple of minutes here and let everyone join. But if this is your first event, if you don't know who we are and what we do, my name is Michael. I'm the founder of Entre. We're a social network for the future of work. So we do a bunch of events, and we also just started rolling out our app, which is available on mobile and web. And it's going to allow you to be able to connect with entrepreneurs, investors, freelancers from pretty much everywhere around the world. And we already have people from over 60 countries on, which is pretty cool. And I just want to show you guys this real quick so you can see some of the upcoming events that we have and everything as well. So this is kind of our general thesis. We believe that the future of work's changing, and it's going to look a lot different. It's going to be much more entrepreneurial and freelancing and self-employed versus employed and the jobs and salary corporate lifestyle. And so here's a little short kind of peek at the app and what you can do on it. You can post content. You can easily search and filter and get feedback on your ideas. You can ask questions. There's short form and long form content creation. And you can just really easily get into a like-minded community of other people in the startup and entrepreneur ecosystem. You can also search very simply for who and what you're looking for. So if you're looking for an investor in AI, you can filter all the investors in AI in 2 clicks, and you can easily connect with them and message them right through the platform. And then we have Entre Pro, which gets you free tickets to all our events and all these deals and discounts with our amazing partners. And then here's some of our upcoming events. We have 2 events tomorrow with investors. One, an angel investor, he just started his own VC fund, Reinforce Ventures. We have Lightship Capital. Brian is the general partner there, which is going to be phenomenal. And then next week we have an interview with Bravo Capital and Mark over there. And you can check out all those at just joinentre.eventbrite.com. And then if there's anything that we can do to help you guys, feel free to reach out to us, support@joinentre.com. That goes straight to my email. If you can sign up for free and create an account, log in at justjoinentre.com. And if you want to open up your phone, and you can scan the QR code to download the app. If you text us, you get a free ticket to any of our events. So shoot us a text, just say hi, whatever, and you'll get a free ticket to any of our events. And follow us on social. We'll repost a bunch of stuff from the events and about our users and members. And that pretty much does it. I just wanted to give a quick intro as people were joining. It looks like we have a little over 50 people coming through already, and I know some people are going to be joining late. At this point in time, I'm going to introduce Josh, who is with Eagle Point Funding. Josh, are you there?
Right here.
Hey, Josh, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm glad to be doing another event with you guys. We did one of these, I think it was 2 months ago, and it was great. So I'm excited to do another one. And I'd love to have you share a little bit more about yourself and Eagle Point. I know I have the presentation. I don't know if you want me to pull it up, or if you want to share your screen, you're more than welcome to do that as well.
Sure. Okay, so I'll share my screen. I'm not going to get started also on that. And in the meantime, I'll just say a word or two about me. My name is Josh Bar-Owen. I'm Vice President of the Eagle Point Funding. And we're a consultancy which assists deep tech companies, as well as companies that are developing dual-use technologies, to fund or to fundraise without losing equity. And we do that by tapping into a annual resource of between 30 to 60 billion dollars, which is the U.S. federal government. U.S. federal government invests tremendously in deep tech and dual-use startups, and they do it for a variety of reasons, which I guess we can tackle under the through the presentation. A little bit personally background about me: married. 6 years. Actually, this tonight was 7 years ago, was the time where my wife and I got back together after a 5-year break. So, and now we have 3 beautiful children. So that's on a personal note. So we're celebrating our anniversary by having this. On top of that, in Eagle Point Funding, we're an extension of a bigger organization that includes 4 different subdivisions that all focus on the world of non-dilutive funding, which is a complementary and powerful field in the world of deep tech because along with VCs, which also invest in deep tech, you have the US federal government and other governments. And what does that actually include? Annually, I mentioned 30 to $60 billion. That's what's available for industry. But the US federal government invests a tremendous amount of money in federal research and development dollars. And that number in 2020 is $161.5 billion, which is split between what goes to federal research labs, universities and academic institutions, as well as nonprofit research and development. And then the federal agencies themselves have an internal budget, which they invest in. Of course, the $30 to $60 billion, which is available for the private sector. Now, and on top of that, there's an additional boost that was given, obviously, with the stimulus fund, which we know. The reason I bring this up is because as the market is trying to find some sort of balance right now, I know investors, and we'll hear about this a little bit later from the 2 talented investors we have on the panel, about what's going on in the private sector. In private sector investments, but the federal government has also rallied and taken a big role through the stimulus package. The different types of investments vary between small business centric investments and investments that can go to small or big businesses. Where the small business centric ones are called SBIR, or Small Business Innovation Research Grants, which are phased funding typically, and they allow for initial investments of anywhere between $50,000 to $250,000 for phase 1. Then, assuming you reach a milestone, they make a bigger investment of typically around $1 million per, though it can be up to $2.5 million per investment. And then some programs offer commercialization assistance, like Air Force Ventures program, which offers up to $15 million of commercialization assistance, which is in order to rally into the end goal of a lot of these programs, which is business to government relationships, where you've developed a technology and that technology may or may not have a dual use purpose. And then you might be able to snag at the end a federal customer, which is obviously a tier 1 client. As opposed to that, there's the broad agency announcement system, which are for big and small business, where it's kind of a competition, let the best tech win. And a lot of the programs are even open to foreign companies competing in the space, as long as their technology is competitive. And this is continuous funding. They don't stagger the grants. They just give you 2 or 3 year grant, and that means that the ceilings on these grants can be in excess of tens of millions of dollars. When we talk about the quality of this investment, it's what's called non-dilutive investment, which means that it's essentially free money. And this is why it goes so well with venture money. When you get a venture capital and you're looking of where to put your best bets, it could be that by putting an emphasis to not only open up a new market, a federal market, but also to snag federal research dollars. And the reason the government does this is for one of 2 primary reasons, both of which I kind of hinted to. One is you're developing deep technologies, and there's over 26 federal agencies, and they are all Fortune 500 and larger organizations, and they have a tremendous amount of challenges. And it could be that the private sector, and with the many innovations that are coming out of the private sector, could be offering solutions to federal challenges that they're experiencing. The other reason that the federal government might be making an investment is for seed money, which is a way to stimulate the economy. Thanks for the markings on the on the screen, whoever is doing their drawings. And that is a whole different reason, where the federal government is investing in order to give a boost. And that's what we see in the stimulus fund, but it's relevant every single year, where the federal government views themselves as an investment wing, which is there to complement the types of research that maybe are not getting the same level of attention from the VC. So how does it work? Typically, in the first case scenario, there is a challenge that, let's say, the Department of Army has an issue where they're not getting enough medical supplies to soldiers that are stationed abroad, and so they have to find out some sort of R&D solution to it. So come a bunch of companies and they solicit, and maybe it's a drone company that does drone delivery, it's another company that is logistics AI platform, and it enables it to happen quicker. And then the federal government selects one or many of these companies to make an investment in. They see how you perform on the R&D, and then if you do a good job, they might come knocking on the door and ask to become a tier 1 client. And there are actually programs today that have this built in, where you don't have to have it as a separate, the sole source contract with the federal agency that falls on, but rather they have it built in. And these programs such as XTech Search or AFWERX may or may not have heard of them, but they're very, very, very easy to work with. AFWERX is one of them. They pay very quickly, within 60 days of a submission. They offer assistance in one of two forms, a track 1 or track 2. The attractive element here is that if you make it into the second track, you are essentially guaranteed a sole source contract, which is like a paying client, with a United States Air Force client. And what's amazing about this is we think of the Air Force and maybe we think of things that fly and nothing else, but really the US Air Force is a tremendously vast organization with a very varied and dynamic type of technological solutions that they're looking for. This program in particular opens later on this month. The other type of investment, which is what I mentioned before, is a seed money for the private sector, where there's a mixture of altruistic as well as capitalistic interest here for the federal government. The altruistic motives are job creation, creating great technology for the people of the United States and for the world, and also to promote the U.S. On a global platform. Capitalistically, they have a similar motivation because they actually see $2.30 for every dollar they invest in you, because ultimately you're generating business, businesses pay taxes, and it pays back into the system. So it's a win-win for them. And these are just some of the programs that are open right now or about to be open, such as the Seed Fund of America, which is the National Science Foundation. They have a small business program. There's going to be an open call, which means that you pitch to the Air Force your technology, and you say how it's going to assist the Air Force, and that opens on August 26th. Is like I mentioned before, it's a great program. Department of Defense has a small business program, which is going to be open in a similar timeline. The federal government and the Department of Defense is investing tremendously into create flying cars, which are flying orbs, which in this program called Agility Prime, which is all elements which is related to flying taxis, which is really cool as well. And there's also everything that's connected to next generation technologies through Army Futures Command, and there are literally hundreds of more of opportunities that are open at any given moment. In a word, what does the federal government grant cover? It covers every single expense which is associated with this research and development program, which includes salaries, or it includes building costs or advisors, and it even enables for us up to a 7% profit, which is basically, if you get $1 million grant, it's $70,000, which doesn't need to be accounted for, which goes to your company as you see fit. And I guess Samara and Shao, you guys will relate to this, but how a private sector investor looks at a company that has been backed by federal grants is one which is just unparalleled, because you basically got them the golden stamp of approval. And this study actually showed that for every federal dollar which was invested in a company, that company turned around and was able to net $8.38 from private sector investments. In other words, a tremendous return on their investment. About us, we're part of the FreeMind group. I mentioned there were 4 divisions, and Eagle Point Funding is one of them. We focus, our company focuses on non-life science related industries. The organization was formed in 1999. Together with our sister companies, we have over $1.5 billion in awards and many, many active clients. And that's pretty much it. If you have deep tech or you're developing dual use technologies, feel free to contact me, and I'll put my contact information in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. That's extremely valuable information, especially people who are looking to fundraise right now, for sure. I think it's huge. And I know you work with a lot of companies who have also raised VC funding and other forms of, capital as well. And it works really well with a lot of, portfolio companies that investors have and whatnot. It's not like necessarily a one or the other thing. It actually is kind of both.
No, it's almost exclusively. You're
Yeah.
going to probably have VC funding just because, that means that you have oxygen, and yeah, it kind of goes hand in hand.
No, it's awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you. I know you just dropped your email in there, and we'll send some more information to everyone. Real quick, if you just joined late too, please make sure you ask questions for our panelists. I'll be in the background once things get kicked off, and I'll be taking a look at all the questions, and we'll do a Q&A towards the end. But without further ado, I'd love to introduce the other panelists. Samara, would you care to introduce yourself, and please fill us in on your background and what you're doing now at Hyperplane?
Sure. Great to be here, guys. So my quick background, I had sort of two lives before joining Hyperplane and getting into early stage tech investing. So started my career in product management, so working in startups in the fintech space, and then met Hyperplane when I pitched a startup to them, which is doing predictive analytics, and that was about 5 years ago when they were also just getting started out of their first fund. So like many people, my entry point into VC was just meeting and getting to know a firm really well, years before actually joining. And then so after those years working in startups, I spent some time in New York doing strategy consulting, and that was sort of my business school. So my chance to really work on corporate strategy, get to understand how larger businesses operate and how they think about working with innovative technologies and startups. And then VC for me was sort of the hybrid of the things I really loved about working in startups and sort of doing the strategy consulting and thinking about big problems in different industries. So I'm here. I'm based in Boston, and early stage investor at Hyperplane. And I'm sure as we talk more about what we do and our investment thesis will come out. So I'll save that.
Okay, fantastic, perfect. Xiao, I'd love to have you introduce yourself as well. And Samara, thank you so much for being here. I think this is going to be a fantastic discussion. Xiao, are you still here? And please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us more about 50 years as well.
Hey everyone, my name is Xiao. It's not very phonetical. My parents insisted I go through life on extra hard mode with my shitty name, so apologies for that. I'm a failed engineer, I like to say. So I started off as a mechanical engineer and a material scientist. My dream was to always build the cars, airplanes, all the cool vehicles in the future, and then hopefully mitigate air pollution and do kind of very, very nice, friendly things for the earth. Spent a brief time at Ford Motor Company. I found out that as an entry-level engineer, you actually don't get to work on anything interesting, and in fact, you don't have to do very much at all. So that was pretty disappointing. So I kind of took a step back, went back to school, and then went through more of a traditional business school route. Did consulting for a couple of years, and then private equity. And then I just really wanted to shoot myself. It was supposed to be good. I was living in New York City, had money, but I just didn't feel like I was making any impact on the world. And I could just see my life floating forward. And I knew that I was going to open up my eyes one day and I'd be like 65, old and decrepit, and the best years of my life had moved on. And I just felt like, what the fuck did I do? Right. The time has passed by and I didn't really do anything meaningful. And that really bugged me. And so, 2 weeks later, I quit my job. I moved to China. I asked myself some very, very hard questions about what could I uniquely do to solve some of the really big problems in the world, given my background, right? And so we just started pulling together all kinds of different technologies that weren't getting enough traction in the States, and then trying to actually commercialize some of these things in China. That led me to form a couple of companies of my own. And then at one point, I randomly owned a string of jewelry companies in southern China using 3D printing to sort of optimize the back-end manufacturing and prototyping process. Did a second startup related to also garment manufacturing. Again, one of those unsexy yet hugely impactful industries in the world. I like to say, as a very unsexy person, I very much resonate with unsexy businesses as well. So it's a good fit for me. And then ran the apparel startup for a little bit. Went through YC here in the States. And 50 Years, the fund that I currently work with, is actually one of my early investors back in the day. And so when it came time for me to think about my next adventure, I didn't feel like I had enough in the tank to actually do another startup. Startups are like kids, as you guys probably know. I already have 2 kids, and I'm already kind of a shitty dad to both of them. So I didn't want to be a shitty dad to 3 children. So I was like, okay, I still want to be on the front lines, helping to solve the world's biggest problems, leveraging my experiences to help founders. What's the best way to do that? And so being in venture definitely seemed like the best way. I'm very privileged to get to talk to some of the smartest people in the world every single week, and then help them hopefully solve the really, really big problems and change the world. And so at 50 Years, roughly, we like to focus on the intersection of the way we describe it, 3 circles of a Venn diagram. The first circle is deep tech. For us, that means we love supporting founders with advanced degrees, with special esoteric knowledge in one particular industry. We love the dynamic where the founder might be one of 30 people in the world that truly understands what they're even trying to solve. Second circle, pretty common in venture. We're looking for opportunities that could be, billion-dollar businesses, and that's, less so than just the profit and revenue, but more so that, we want actual solutions that are going to touch millions, if not billions, of lives. And in our capitalist economy, like that impact can largely be measured by, how much economic activity can you generate. And then the third one is we love to support founders that are solving the world's biggest problems. I'm not that interested in a dog walking app or how do I sell more clothing on Instagram. There's nothing wrong with those businesses per se, but the world is currently on fire a little bit, and I'm much more passionate about people who want to help humanity and society level up so we can build a much better world for everyone. And so right at that intersection, 50 Years looks at early stage startups. We typically support founders with anywhere from 500,000 to 1.5 million in early seed stage funding. So I'm excited to talk to all of you guys, excited to hopefully be helpful as you guys walk your own journeys. And it's just a real privilege to be here. So thank you for everyone for having me.
Thank you so much. That was, you're hilarious, by the way. I love your candidness. No, that was great. And I'm glad you got into your investment thesis also. That was a very clear picture, and I'm glad you drew it up that way. And yeah, we're glad to have you here as well. On that note, Samara, do you want to share your investment thesis and what kind of startups and companies that you guys invest in?
Sure. So obviously, deep tech is a big focus area for us. I'd say also beyond that, data technologies and machine intelligence companies in general. For us, besides not doing anything consumer, I mean, we just focus on B2B. If you look at our portfolio, it sort of runs the gambit from an industry perspective. So our approach is really technology, team, traction. So the first thing for us is looking at what sort of differentiated technology and hard technology the team's developed or is working on. And then because we invest early, we invest pre-seed and seed. The team is always important, but especially important in those really early days. So, our vision of what a Hyperplane founder is something that's kind of fits into our thesis and what we look for. And then from there, that's when we'll kind of look to understand the market and traction, if there is any, is it where it should be, and sort of commercialization of the technology. But yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, really, really broad range in terms of what industries and sectors we look for. We have different, theses in different sectors about what we think is sort of the inevitable progression and trajectory of that industry. So be it fintech or robotics or whatever, we have some general ideas, but then what we're really looking for is sort of innovation on the tech and something that we can sink our teeth into and get excited about.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think it's perfect for this discussion for sure. So we're thrilled you're here. The first kind of like question I want to throw out is we have a lot of early stage founders watching this. Some have maybe already raised some funding. Some are still at the stages where they're building or looking for their team or trying to get product market fit and or trying to get their first clients and whatnot. And we can, I think it might be good to have Josh start too, but I'd love to get all three of your perspectives on what do you guys look for and what have you noticed that separate the good startups from the not so good ones, or the ones that continue on to go through later rounds of funding and actually turn a profit and or kind of run the gamut of not failing within the first 3 years or whatever, right? Are there any things that you guys specifically look for? And Josh, yours is a little bit different, but what I guess would be, what do you look for with the startups that you guys help get funding? What are the key things that you've noticed that get them the funding from the government? And then for Samara and Xiao, are there any traits that you guys see in founders or early stage startups that you look for to make investments in?
Sure. So I mean, it touches upon what you could call it the investment thesis, quote unquote, of the U.S. federal government and like what they're looking for. And like I said, there are 26 different agencies, so it's difficult to narrow it down in one. I hate the word thesis. Why are we using this word? But let's say call it a thesis, right? I don't know, it draws me back to college, and I'm like, the dream, the recurring dream I still have. I'm 36 years old. I'm waking up and still thinking I have a test tomorrow and I didn't study. I don't know if anybody else has ever had that, but anyways, okay, let's say it's a thesis. So the investment thesis of the U.S. federal government is quote unquote unified, though obviously it's tailored based on the type of tech that they're looking for. And it's really 4 stages. One is either deep tech or dual use. And the other way to think of this is either it's innovation or application, right? So you have to have deep tech, or in other words, it's truly innovative pioneer technology, but that's not enough, because if the application is weak, then it doesn't matter how deep it is, it's probably not going to get funded. The other thing, which is, this touches on what Samara said, it has to be, the team has to be strong, because if the federal government is looking at a couple founders that have a great idea, but they have no background of being successful, or they don't have a patent under their name, they don't have the right letters at the end of their name, they're not a master's in engineering or whatever needed here, or they don't have a history of getting it done, then the federal government will look at that team less favorably than another team. So it just means that makes the need for great tech to be even stronger. The third is market viability. I know this sounds a little bit strange, because we talked about one of the applications that the federal government is looking whether or not they can become a customer, but the federal government knows that maybe it won't become a customer. And if that's the case, they don't want the money to go down the drain. They want you to build something which is going to have a strong market. So market viability and understanding of your market is a very big indicator of whether or not a company is going to get funded or not. And the fourth is whether or not the tech is relevant to the particular agency itself. So if you're touching on a pain point or something that they can understand a real need for, then the chance of getting funded is that much higher. I just want to touch on for a second, because I understand I'm using a term that maybe some people here are not familiar with, the word dual use. Dual use technologies. Samara and Xiao, are you guys familiar with that concept, dual use? Yeah?
I am not. I can guess though. Does that mean both men and women can use it?
No, that's just called technology.
Oh, okay.
Right. But no, dual use technology means that the market is both the third market, which is like the federal government itself. In other words, you have some technology which might apply to the Department of Defense's logistics agency, right? It's, let's say, predictive analytics, and it's got all vehicles in the Department of Defense, which, let's say there are 300,000 vehicles in the Army alone. Then the predictive analysis analytics would provide a tremendous solution. But then in the private sector, it's obvious that that also has an application. So the federal government makes an investment because they see themselves as a potential user of your technology, but they also understand that while they promoted your R&D with a couple $1 million in funding, they also propelled your commercial products. So when we talk about dual use, that's the implication here of whether or not your product could be relevant in two markets simultaneously. And that's it. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. We also had a question, and I'd love to get Samara and Xiao, your thoughts too on what you look for in startups to make investments. And then we have a question here that I think is relevant. I'll get to this right after you guys respond with what you're kind of looking for in startups.
Yeah, I'll pop in here. So, I mean, this sounds pretty basic, but I just see it go wrong so often. So one sort of fundamental question is, are you raising the right amount of money? And are you going to have the money that you need to hit the next milestone? This is especially relevant, again, when you're in the really early stage, because running out of cash is what's going to most likely kill you in the early days. I mean, you're going to go through a lot of pivots. You're going to hire people, change the company a lot. But when you're out of cash, you're out of cash. So one of the things I really look for is a founder that's done their best to plan out and think about both how much they're raising, how much they're going to need, and what sort of a strategy is for hitting the, in our case, when we invest the seed, the Series A milestones. And I'm not talking about having really clear projections in some Excel files. For us, that's a lot less important. We just basically know it's wrong if you're doing all that work really early, but some sense of like, this is the money that we need to grow our team with these people, and hit these milestones that are going to be the ones that they've correctly identified as the right milestones for their next raise. Or if it's not a raise, then for their whatever crucial amount of ARR that they're going to need to grow to the next level. So that's one piece, is just the funding. And then the other thing that's really important, I mentioned people and team. I think culture, it's never too early to really be thoughtful about what kind of company culture you're creating. So that's something that I know at Hyperplane, we always ask about. We think it's really awesome when we don't have to ask about it, because it's so clear that the founders thought about it and they just, it's right up there at the beginning of their pitch. Your first 10 or so employees are going to set the culture for your company, and that's pretty sticky. So are you being deliberate about it? Are you being thoughtful about the kind of company that you're trying to build, that you really want to build a company? And then the other piece, of course, is just on the actual technology itself and your business model. Is it the right time for what you're doing? Especially in deep tech, I think a lot of the criticism, a lot of the reasons why firms pass on deep tech companies is that they just think it sounds like a science project. This is something, some of the traditional examples are in blockchain, AR, VR. For me right now, it's brain machine interfaces, that there's just not yet a real market or use case for it. And you as a very early stage startup, you're going to run out of capital before it's anything more, it's commercialized, before it's really a product. So I think having a clear idea of like, yes, we're working on hard tech. Yes, this is new and innovative, but we have a short-term strategy for how we can bring this to market. Is something that's important. I think, one thing is it's never too early to think about your sales strategy. And I think when a founder can show that they have the deep tech background, but also that they know how to at least think about bringing in talent on the sales team and sort of growing a business, that's something that is actually pretty rare in this industry, and really, makes a founder backable.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's great advice. Xiao, I'd love to get your thoughts on what you're looking for with startups that you invest in.
Yeah, for us, we definitely over-index on the founder, the team. You know, when you're talking about an early stage startup, you're talking about a situation where there's oftentimes more questions than answers. There's more potential energy than kinetic energy at first, right? And so many things can change. Your business model can change. The team members can change. You know, how you approach the market could change. But the founders largely stay the same, and they're the ones building that DNA into really every aspect of the business. And so, you know, for us, making sure that the founding team has that, you know, mission driven focus and that drive to be overcomers, right? You know, essentially, if you're a startup founder, you know, your job is to overcome obstacles every single day, right? There's no scenario that I knew about that, you know, people just slide down a slide and everything, you know, goes very, very easily. And so is this the kind of team that can fundamentally face and overcome some of the challenges that'll come up? That's the most important thing for us.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's really critical, and I'm glad you brought this up because it leads right into one of the questions that I wanted to talk about here. Someone was asking about a solo founder, right? And being a solo founder, do you guys immediately kind of discount these companies? You know, being that, you know, generally there's 2 or 3 co-founders or an early team. What if someone's, you know, just doing this themselves and they might have built an MVP themselves or whatever? Do you say this is great, but hey, go back and, you know, build a team and get some people around you? Or how do you approach companies that are, you know, kind of, you know, you're in talks of, or they might be interesting, but it's a solo founder? How do you guys think about that? And then Josh, I'd love to get your thoughts on it from the perspective of, does the government even take any companies that it's just a solo person as well? So whoever wants to kick it off, Josh, you can start, and then we can kind of keep the same rotation if we want.
Well, whatever works. So I think it's a great question. We're working currently with one quote unquote company of one who has won. It's a male founder of the company, CEO, VP of business development, whatever you want to call him, and he's done quite well for himself, and he's won multiple federal funding, maybe multi-million-dollar worth of and federal investments. However, each project has a team, and he runs it with multiple subcontractors or brings them on as parallels and employs them temporarily under his business. But I don't understand how one person can do all the elements of a business. I understand how one person could be in charge of maybe even the technology, if the technology has a very direct implementation, and it only involves like one set of code or whatever it is, probably on the software side. However, long term, running a business that way, I don't think I can't conceive of one person who is that talented and has that many hours of the day to run a business.
Samara?
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with what Josh said. We don't have by any means a hard and fast rule about number of co-founders. I think that your ability to bring a team around you, whether it's a co-founder or just early employees, is going to be indicative of a lot of other traits that make you a good leader and CEO. So both, you know, your ability to sell your business and inspire people to want to join you or to want to buy your software or invest in you, that's very similar skill set to kind of what the work to build your early team is going to be the same work to sell your first customers and to inspire your first investors. So I think it's just very likely that if it's still only you're too early for venture capital. There's probably more, unless you're a total superhuman, or maybe we've been watching you for years because of previous companies, or we've been watching you in a lab, just do something absolutely mind-blowing, and just wanting to throw in money at the earliest possible days. Probably, most likely, one of the first things you should do is get some people around you before you even think about raising venture capital. You shouldn't want venture capital at that point. You should at least spend some time building some pieces of the business out before you take other people's money. So it's rare that there's absolutely no one. It's not rare for us that it's a solo founder. The other thing, I think, the personality trait behind having an early team around you, that's not always but often the case, is just a certain sense of humility and understanding that this is what my skill set is, but here's the skills I lack. And especially, as early stage investors, we're expecting to be in a relationship with you for many, many years. And, we would probably need to do a little bit more diligence or back channeling on your character if it's just you, versus being able to spend some time with you and an early team to see what the culture is, to see how you interact, to see, have you built the right team around you. It also ends up being really important to your business, your ability to just find the right talent and sell them on your vision. So that would just be like kind of a check mark for us that, yes, you've been able to do that. We're impressed by the team you've put around you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. Xiao.
I think it's been said pretty well. Obviously, no hard and fast rules, but certainly having more people helps. It's definitely not a bad thing if you just meet an amazing person. I mean, in a lot of ways, venture is tyranny of the power law, right? We are looking for exceptional people, and certain exceptional people can certainly do it well themselves. And it doesn't need to be a founder level position, but you can certainly hire and find team members to help you out. But I think I just did a quick glance across my portfolio. I think the vast majority, I would say 85% plus, are multi-founder teams. But I don't think we would ever say no to taking a meeting, or it's not like a red flag even if you're a single founder. By definition, you're trying to create something that no one else has ever done, right? So there's no playbook for that. There's no rule that says one person can't do it, especially if you can hire the right people to surround yourself with it. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
I just see something in the comments to just respond really quickly to. Patricia, I think, pronouncing your name correctly, hopefully. Talking about whether it's unfair to have that bias against sole founders if they're really awesome. I would just I do want to emphasize again, if you're really, really awesome, I think you'll find the partners who really believe in you, but you're not just out yourself to be really awesome. At the end of the day, you need to build a business, and you cannot do that alone. So the early team can change, but showing that other people that can recognize that you're awesome and want to be involved. I mean, we see often that if it's a funding challenge, it's like, this is my team, these are my pipeline people, they're committed, they're going to come and meet you and talk about why they're passionate about this deal. And they're going to join after we're funded because they just can't afford to join us right now and not get paid. That happens a lot. We've seen really awesome people come to our offices and want to incubate their idea with us for a little bit before they're getting funded. And then we help find other people for them. So there are lots of ways where really awesome founders with awesome ideas can get something off the ground, just them, but you have to acknowledge that that's going to involve other people.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, building Entre over the last couple of years, and talking to many successful founders and investors, team is a critical part of it. And even just us, the more as we continue to grow just ourselves, I realize how much I need to start delegating even more and more all the time. And finding the right people to take on, certain things within our company. But then it's the same thing that I see it's a common thing that I see with all the other investors and founders that I speak to. And I think it's a huge part of it. But I think you guys all said, fantastic pieces of advice there for solo founders or even just smaller teams when they're starting out. The next topic I want to get into is just everything going on right now. Obviously, I'm sure you guys have talked a lot about this with your teams. You've probably gone, you've probably had a lot of calls with your portfolio companies. I'm sure you've had a lot of calls with your LPs and or your other partners at your firms about COVID and all the changes that are happening to different industries and stuff. It's just strange times, and it's stuff that hasn't happened before, and a lot of founders are kind of out of the blue on it. If we can go through real quick and get everyone's thoughts on kind of the current market conditions, and do you think that this is a deep tech event? So let's try to talk about this sector, in particular, going through what's happening with COVID. Have you seen deep tech get more funding, less funding, more interest from the market? Have you seen companies in deep tech, get really hurt by this over the last few months? And do you think there's a lot of opportunity for deep tech companies going forward with COVID? And, it seems like everything's shifting towards technology even more so now than ever. So do you see that as an opportunity for deep tech companies right now? And Josh, you can kick things off too from what you've seen from, I know you work with a lot of companies that also get VC funding as well, and within your portfolio at Eagle Point. And then, with the government, it seems like they're kind of looking to invest a lot right now. So I'd love to get your thoughts on all of this.
Right. So from what we see in the companies we're working with, as far as their VC raising, which they're doing on their own, we're not involved in it, but definitely in the beginning, I think all of us were in some sort of shock and just overwhelmed by the sudden drastic global change. And we could see it in the private sector, obviously, and the market slowed, and it seemed like investors were slowing too. And then right now, it feels like things are opening back up, even though it's not clear that the situation is getting any better, but it does seem like there is grappling with the new normal, and that the markets have opened up as far as that on the private side. That's what I see from the companies that we're working with. From the government side, there have been a couple stages. First of all, very quickly, the stimulus fund was injected into the federal agencies and disseminated also to small businesses and big businesses to assist and offset costs. But as far as R&D funding goes, COVID-19 has been, in the beginning, it was a really big distraction. And I mean that there was such an emphasis on the desire to do well, but sometimes, that desire to do well causes other sectors to suffer. So there was a lot of effort and emphasis being put on COVID-19 related technologies, anything to help, in a real desire to create solutions. And some of it has been really good, and some of it has not been so great. And there's still some programs, and they seem to be getting better over time. But thankfully, the programs were always there, but they seem like they're a little more focused. And the programs are more focused back on the core deep tech and getting them funded. And while COVID is still something that is promoted, is not promoted with the same level of emphasis as before. So now the other sectors can get easier funding or funding with less effort, which would have otherwise gone to them, but because of the immense amount of noise, it was maybe a little more distracted at the time. Today things have cleared up. It's pretty standard. They never have once deviated from their initial budget for R&D funding of $161.5 billion. And the stimulus fund has probably increased it by a little bit for all areas of tech, not just COVID.
Yeah, so I'll pop in. I'm pretty optimistic about COVID's effect on deep tech sector. I think it's actually going to be an accelerant for a lot of the digitization and automation that a lot of deep tech companies have been working on and sort of believe is the inevitable sort of way that the world is moving, and that this is mostly most of this comes from the B2B world. I think consumer is a different game, which I know less well, but at least with B2B, I think we're seeing a lot of structural changes that can be leveraged and a lot of process improvements. And it's been sort of necessitated by the pandemic. And then I think that for a lot of these processes that make make things easier, more cost efficient, safer, faster, whatever it is, there's not going to be any reason to go back. So, be it robotics or AI, this has been we've seen, at least in our portfolio, that the last couple of months have been the best months for a lot of our companies, and we were really nervous about that. We didn't know it was going to be that way, but I think we're kind of far enough into it that we have reason to believe that a lot of these improvements and these process changes are actually here to stay, and will kind of continue to be an accelerant. I think that market conditions, there was a big slowdown in VC funding at the beginning of this. I think, at least what I'm seeing, and from talking to founders, that's changing now. And I think getting used to this new way of making investments remotely is going to work. I think it's also, there's a sales process that's changing for a lot of B2B companies that used to do everything in person, both for fundraising and selling to customers. And there's going to be a rift between companies that can figure out how to do content marketing, that can figure out how to sell and onboard remotely, and those that can't. So that's sort of an added layer of complexity to just, market conditions is of course the pandemic. But I'm overall pretty optimistic for the long-term effect on deep tech.
Samara, have you made investments sight unseen?
We have. Yeah, we just closed our first that we completely never met the founder, had any interactions before. It was tough. It was our process was really different. But
you would have never done that before, right?
No, never done that before.
Cool.
And it was hard. And I'm not even sure that the way that we got to do this deal we'll be able to repeat for the next couple. I think, the process wasn't perfect, but we were all excited enough to say yes and wanting to kind of get that check-in. But yeah, it's been really weird to do. But I think we have money to spend. We're like, this is here to stay. A lot of other firms feel the same. It's our job to spend capital, and as long as now that we've seen that our portfolio is doing okay and we don't need to leave all of our capital for reserves, we're ready to go. And I'm seeing this across the board, fortunately.
So cool. Yeah,
that's great. Xiao, how about you? How are things going with just with you and in 50 years as well?
Oh, me, but my life kind of sucks. I have like 2 kids at home that I have to be stuck with all day, which is terrible. But like overall, I think Samara said it well. Josh said it well. I would just add that, deep tech is not a monolith, and you get there's tremendous differences in, say, telehealth and telemedicine and things related to wellness, which are seeing kind of their moment in the sun. Same thing with ed tech, right? Everyone's thinking about these problems that COVID has really brought into focus, versus if you're doing anything related to food or the travel industry. I mean, it's tough times right now. And I think even between startups, what we're seeing is a bit of a bifurcation, so to speak, where if you've already been doing well and you're a high performer, funds have money. There's a lot of money lying around, and they're all kind of focusing in on a couple of the strong players. And so we've actually seen tremendous markups for a lot of companies. Versus if you're brand new and you don't have anything, or it might have been harder for you originally, now it's going to be extra tough because people are going to be a little bit more wary, a little bit wary because of the ambiguity going on. And ultimately, that's where I end up at the end of the day. There's still so much ambiguity right now. I'd be hard pressed to say anything definitive about how much of this is ephemeral, how much of this is long lasting. But on our end, a lot of our technologies, we're talking about a 5-10 year journey. We're talking about a long-term relationship we're building with the founders. And, we're pretty optimistic, as Samara also said, that, this is going to be overall, either a positive or a neutral thing, right? COVID won't change the fact that we need to dramatically improve the electrical grid. It doesn't change the fact that we need brand new water infrastructure across the world. It won't change the fact that, cancer needs to be cured. And those are the areas that, we were already really, really interested in. And we don't see a lot of changes happening.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think those are all great insights, everybody. Yeah, and from what I've seen too, it seems like all the companies that are adapting the quickest and really, like you said, there's a lot of unknowns right now, and there's a lot of things changing, but I think there's so much opportunity as well during any challenging time, that it presents great opportunities for startups and technology. And this is what it's built for, right? This is, to innovate is the, that's the core of what entrepreneurship is all about. And, for us, we're just trying to help people do it quicker and faster and easier, and get into a platform and a community that supports it, come out to events like this, meet really cool people, and get insights. We have an interesting question here from Manu about IP and patents that I think is pretty timely, especially for this industry. How much of that, I mean, obviously it's something that you guys are looking at, whether they have patents, certain IP, certain technology that's game changing. And I know obviously the government, is looking at this too as a sign of, okay, these people are very legit and whatnot. How much of that do you guys take into account when you're researching companies or going through due diligence with companies? Is it a big part of your thesis? I know Josh hates this word, but is it a big part of I guess the fundraising process that you're looking for, especially in the deep tech space, right? This specifically, is it something that you're looking a lot at? And whoever wants to jump in.
I can comment on this first. I spent a big part of my career looking at IP specifically. I mean, for us, we're looking at early stage startups, and this is one of those like baby bear porridge situations, right? Yeah, it can't be too hot, it can't be too cold. If you truly have deep tech, you have to make sure you have freedom to operate, that you actually own the technology. Specifically, a lot of these companies, they get spun out of major research universities. What's the situation with the IP? Is it encumbered because it's owned by, MIT still? Do you have access to it? Do you have licenses to it? Could someone else get license to it, right? What if 3M can just take the technology and do their own shit with it? These are fundamental questions that have to be answered. But at the same time, you're talking about a startup that doesn't have $30 billion to spend on expensive lawyers, right? Filings aren't cheap. And so it really shows and demonstrates the judgment of the founders, whether they can balance this to make sure that they can be strategic with how they spend their money, with how they build both their offensive and defensive strategy with IP. And so it's definitely a point that we use to judge how ably the founders are able to manage the business initially. And while they don't need to have like a multi-patent portfolio, it's not uncommon to see either an exclusive license with the university or the core ownership over the patents that give them the freedom to operate.
Gotcha. Josh, Samara, do you want to chime in on this?
Sure. So, I mean, I think it depends if that's what you're pitching as your, biggest piece of your business. If your narrative is around something that you've developed that's really unique, then obviously wanting to see that you have some IP around it is going to be a big piece of it. I think a lot of companies have taken technology that exists already and just found really disruptive ways to bring it to market. And so, of course, there it might be less important. I think when it's often one way to really understand something as an investor, especially a generous investor like us at Hyperplane, we can't possibly understand as much as you do about your market or your industry or what you're building. Often as part of diligence, reading through and trying to really understand and use our expert network to digest and go through the IP of the company is one really good way to both diligence the IP, but also really understand your business and what's unique about it and what the big potential outcome is from it. So yeah, I would say, when there is solid IP, it's something that we do spend time looking into, but it's not absolutely necessary. One framework that I particularly love is when a company has one sort of key piece of innovation that's really unique to them that they have strong IP around, and then the business kind of vertically and or horizontally can integrate and do a lot that's not sort of core IP, but the reason why they're going to win is because this one innovation that's uniquely theirs. So an example, like from our portfolio, would be soft robotics, that their key innovation is in the gripper and the gripper technology, and that's a really, really hard problem. And so a lot of our diligence with them was focused on, is this key innovation that they're making their kind of whole approach to robotics on, is it really unique, and are they really protected with that IP? So, and then, everything that they can do and all the different use cases in robotics that they can kind of branch out into, I don't really care so much about the competition, because I've really focused in on and kind of believe in your one slice of innovation. So I think that's a model that often really works well. And that's where, I'd want to dig in on just kind of that IP, but I don't need to see that the company has it on everything that they do, if that makes sense.
So I'll jump in and I'll speak from the perspective of what we see and what it seems like the federal government prioritizes. So I think the federal government is trying to get at a better understanding before placing an investment in a company of why they should do so. And there are a number of key indicators of why a company from technical savviness level should be trusted. So, for instance, a patent is not going to say whether or not you're business savvy. It's not going to say whether or not you're a good manager. But it will speak to the volumes of the technology and your ability to build the IP around it. So it proves that you're not naive and you believe that you understand that a patent is an important step. However, it's certainly not the only indicator. There are other ones which might be even more so. I think the strongest indicator is whether or not you've done it before. Like, you do have a reason to be trusted with investment, and if not, then a patent can be used to support it. Or if not the experience or not the patents under your name, then it's whether your previous research, and say academic research, if you have a master's or even a PhD, and whether or not it shows that you can be trusted with the investment dollars to go and develop what you're about to, but what you're supposed to be promoting through your business. But it's certainly not the only indicator.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. I have one more question that I want to throw out to everyone, and then we'll jump into some Q&A. And for everyone who wants to stick around at the end, we will do some breakout sessions so that you can meet some of the other attendees. Obviously, the speakers don't have to stay for that, because I know everyone's tight on schedules and has a bunch of things going on. I know Shao probably has to get back with his kids. But I do want to get your final thoughts on this topic, which is predictions for the future in this category, right? I think this is one of the, in my opinion, the funnest categories to predict what is going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. So I'd love to get your thoughts on what your predictions are in the deep tech space, and then maybe one or two very particular, subcategories of deep tech that you're really fascinated by and think that there's a lot of potential for this over the next several years. Samara or Shao, feel free to. I don't know who wants to go first on this one.
I guess I can share. This might not be the answer you're looking for, but I see an intense urgency where if we don't fundamentally solve some of these problems, I think the world as we know it will cease to exist, right? Specifically in the U.S., I think we've lived in a very privileged bubble for a very, very long time. But, I think things like civil war or the breakup of the country, or at least losing our leadership position as even the land where you can pursue deep tech at the cutting edge, might be at stake right now, right? We live in a very precarious situation where if we don't solve some of the fundamental problems with energy and climate change, things are only going to accelerate and get worse. And so in that sense, I think we have this window open, for how long, I can't say, but it's extremely important that we do everything what we can while we have the resources available to create the technologies that are going to enable humanity to survive in a more sustainable way. That's the only long-term, really perspective that I have and I care about.
There are a few things that I'm pretty bullish on. right now. One of them is voice. I think I've been playing with a lot of really cool futuristic technologies relating to connecting through voice, having, I think that we've been pretty disappointed with what the applications so far have been with Siri and Alexa devices and things like that. I think the future of a world where your voice is really powerful as a way to interact with smart devices, and I see a future both for on the consumer, maybe gaming side, the way that we interact virtually with each other in communities. We've seen a need for and some joy around really cool voice technologies. And then from sort of a B2B perspective around voice clouds, and can we get to a point where through smart headphones we're able to use our voice to order Ubers, order food, get information in a more natural way and more personal. I'm pretty bullish on some cool innovation happening there. I think the next frontier after that is also with movement and sort of haptic feedbacks, and I think that's what's missing from, I'm moving my hands around, and that's something that's missing from our interactions online today. But I think we're going to see some cool things open up with that as well. Some other areas I'm pretty excited about that relate especially to COVID is with health tech. I'm pretty bullish on next gen sequencing, and as it's getting cheaper to innovate off of, and obviously telehealth is that we're seeing a lot of innovation and sort of a need for innovation right now that I think is here to stay, and there's going to be a lot of interesting deep tech that comes out of that. And then another area that I've just been looking into recently is with supply chain logistics. And I think we're also being forced right now to kind of see a lot of weaknesses in how the supply chain works, especially when you have complex, and most companies do have very complex supply chains. So I think that's also going to be an area for innovation, from logistics improvements to security, shipping. All of that is an interesting area to watch.
So I actually agree strongly with what Samara just said, and a lot of points. I'm going to add a couple more. I think what we're seeing right now is a high emphasis. This is already out there, but it's out there with the hope that the federal governments of this will invest, and what they see is what could potential next generation. So a lot of emphasis is being put on right now with the third wave of AI, which is contextual reasoning, which is AI that can, within context, react, respond, and generate responses. So that does already exist to a certain level in the market, but it's pushing the envelope on that. I think that there is a tremendous emphasis right now being placed on communication technologies, what Samara was saying as well, and we see that also with the funding opportunities that are coming out, and to make communication smoother, more interactive, and something that, because of the real reality right here, is we need to do a better job of being able to interact with people, especially when a lot of people are more isolated. So that's what is. I want to see something I'd like to see, and then I want to see something which is unimaginable, which I would love to see. What I'd like to see right now, and this is also global, but obviously in the U.S. it is of paramount need. I'd like to see objective technology for media. I think that there will be a market for it, but it's going to have to be supported by forward-thinking VCs and governmental agencies to really promote objective tech for media, because what Xiao was saying is spot on. America's headed towards a civil war if it doesn't find a place for common dialogue in the middle somewhere. The discussions have to happen in a middle space, and I think that objective media could provide potentially a place for everybody to have something to agree upon. Then something unimaginable. was just seeing something about this earlier today, but something, it didn't take it quite as far as I'm going to take it. I'd love to see sharing smell digitally. And we're so far removed from it, but it's an interesting concept. And if we can get there, I think that the level of interaction as relates to the communication technologies, I think it could be something really, really interesting. But I think we're a little bit off on that one. I think we got some time.
Yeah, I completely agree about the media stuff. We've looked at a handful of, broadly anything in civic tech, to your point, Josh, I think would be really, really interesting. And I think there needs to be some business model innovations. There needs to be some ideas that, turn it from not just hey, society needs this, but also can this be sustainable from a business perspective before kind of venture gets involved. But yeah, I absolutely agree on the need.
I think Michael might have frozen over there. There's that. Maybe he's coming back. Michael, you back with that? There he is.
Yeah. Well, it's more time to talk about digital set technology.
Hey guys, can you hear me now?
I have IP around that. Shao, I see where you're going.
I think it was like maybe a year ago, I saw someone actually doing that. They wanted to do like, it's like smell as the last frontier for augmented reality, right? So.
But people will abuse it. Once it's there.
For sure. Yeah.
Michael, I think you're back.
Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry. I'm in Jersey right now, and we just had a hurricane come through yesterday. So my internet's been on and off like the whole day. But good thing for phones and Zoom on cell phones. So I wanted to open it up to Q&A now and get a couple questions from the audience before we wrap up. One question that came in earlier that I think is great conversation, and it's something that we're really focused on solving as well as just with Entre itself is how can founders connect and reach out to investors right now? Obviously there's not any in-person meetings going on. Maybe some founders would meet people at certain events or certain programming that local groups would put on. Now that everything's virtual, do you have any advice for how founders should approach investors, or how should they be networking right now? Obviously, in my opinion, I think trying to find as many virtual events or podcasts and stuff is fantastic. Samara, we connected on Twitter, and I've actually done that. I didn't really realize how big the VC community is on Twitter until last year, and it's totally changed my whole perspective on Twitter. But investors now more than ever are on Twitter, and it's a really easy way to communicate with them. That's not that's genuine and real. We've gotten several speakers from that. I don't know how well it would be just pitching them, your deck or something like that. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on, how you like to get reached out to, right? What you're looking for. If someone's sending you a cold email, what do you want in it? Just like, quick things. Should they attach their pitch deck? How do you like to get approached right now? And what is your advice for founders as how they should be reaching out to investors right now?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think, you're right. On the one hand, you don't have in-person events. You don't have sort of the spontaneity of meeting someone in person somewhere, which makes things harder. On the other hand, I do think now is a moment where I've even found that people that I thought, I would never hear back from are responsive. We're kind of all sitting at home. Are in some ways the days seem like they have more hours and you're more reachable. I think also with some of the conversations that have happened in recent months around Black Lives Matter and lack of diversity in tech and VC, I think one of the moves that, and maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I do think that it's not just lip service. I think there was a real spotlight that was shown on sort of the biases in needing to have warm intros, a lot of the problems with that. And I think many VCs have both said publicly and actually are, changing their thoughts and sort of openness to cold outreach. That being said, it gets to be a lot, and you get a lot of junk. And when I say junk, I don't necessarily mean bad companies, but just pitches that are so off. And if they took 10 minutes to look at what your fund does, they'll realize, like, they should have emailed you. And it's because of those kind of cold emails that you end up kind of not wanting to look at any of the cold emails. It's just because so often they're just off, not on the mark for what you do. So at least speaking for myself personally, the cold emails that I get, I really want to see that you've done some research on me or the fund, and you put it right there in the email why you care, why you want to meet Hyperplane, whether it be another portfolio company that you know something about, or whatever it is. But if you're asking someone to take the time to meet with you without knowing anything, then at least put the time in to personalize your outreach to them. And a lot of the founders that I've met in this pandemic time have been online. I posted my Twitter there. Just some smart engagements that we've had on tweets that they've commented on mine, or I've commented on theirs. I've gotten to know that. It feels like I've gotten to know them a little bit, so it doesn't feel cold. But I think that's a lot of things that people are talking about now, is like try to form somewhat of a relationship, and virtually it's easier than ever to kind of form some sort of a relationship with someone you've never met. And that's true for VCs too. So just start engaging with someone you want to meet and be really thoughtful about why you want to meet with them.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. One thing that I've learned talking with a lot of investors and with our own investors and everything is make sure it's relevant for their fund when you're reaching out, and that there is obviously some general interest, right? You're going to know whether they're genuinely interested in your industry and your company. You should know generally if they're, even before meeting them, right? Whether it's something that this is something that they're probably going to be interested in, at least to talk to about. And I think it's great advice. Xiao, what's your thoughts on how founders should be reaching out to investors, and do you have any tips or strategies for it?
Yeah, I think what Samara said was 100% spot on. I don't mind reading cold emails as long as they're focused and it shows that there's been some thought and there's a good fit involved, right? I think the people that don't do that kind of ruin it for everyone, sadly. But other than that, like I think what you said before, I mean, I think every VC is kind of hungry to like interact with people and just not kind of sit on our hands. And so everyone's doing events, everyone's doing like different kinds of webinars. I think there's plenty of opportunities to get involved and find the right people that are going to be a right fit for the idea that you're pitching. And then just all the usual stuff still applies, right? Hustle hard, find warm contacts. Those are always the best ways to get in touch with people. But
For sure. Yeah, I think it's huge. And it's one of the reasons why we're doing, all of these events, and why we built our platform, so you can literally filter by investors in one click, and by industry and all of that, making it, very, very easy and simple. But I think there's a number of different ways, and, networking, even asking people within your existing network, hey, who do you know that could introduce me? Things like that are huge. And I think that I want to be careful of everyone's time. I know we're coming up on 3:30 here, so I'd love to just leave it with, what are you guys, any immediate, where can people find you, follow you? What are you looking for? How should people reach out to you if they're, if they have these, if they fit these things that you're looking for, the criteria that you're looking for? And then any final thoughts that you have for, this just deep tech topic and for entrepreneurs and other investors who are watching?
I'm happy to kick that off. First of all, your first question, Michael, is I prefer to be reached out through via email, LinkedIn, close second. And as far as the world that we swim in, which is the world of federal grants, not every company is relevant for grants by any means. Like I said earlier on, so anybody's coming in late, we're looking to work with companies that are dual use purpose, which means that they potentially could apply to the commercial as well as to the federal sector, or companies that have deep innovative tech and understand that it's also a process that the funding doesn't necessarily happen in a day. There's some faster funding programs, but some of the other programs are slower, and so it might take a couple months to see funding. So also to keep that in mind. So I guess looking for those patient deep tech or dual use companies that are interested in potentially opening up a very meaningful channel, which could lead to not only investments without capital, without losing capital in your company, or losing equity in your company, but also could open up a channel for a federal client. And I'll put my email in the chat.
That'd be great. Yeah. Samara?
Yeah, so to be completely honest, my email stresses me out a little bit. So I'm actually much better on Twitter and LinkedIn, which I'm happy to see. I've already gotten some people reaching out on social media. So it just feels a little bit more personal and like a happier me when I'm reading through my Twitter and LinkedIn messages as opposed to just a messy inbox. So I think I posted my Twitter, and just be warned, it's not a not professional Twitter, but I definitely have a little bit of shit posting that I do. So just understand that if you're gonna follow me. And yeah, I mean, final thoughts. I think, it's funny, we're here talking about deep tech and we've had like some technical issues, and I was just thinking earlier, I was playing around with GPT-3, and like I think we're very much still in a moment where deep tech AI is we like have a bad joke that AI is like stands for almost implemented, because I think there's so much cool stuff, but it still often feels like companies that are succeeding in deep tech are really like these little pieces of maybe brilliance in what is still very much a sea of nonsense, and we're on the cusp of something really great in deep tech and artificial intelligence, but I think what's kind of most important now, and as you think about building your own companies and the narrative that you're telling when you're selling and when you're raising money, kind of accept humbly that we haven't perfected these technologies yet, but give a reason why the piece of it that you figured out is that very rare breed of brilliance in deep tech, that's ready to go now. And it could be brilliant but not ready to go, and it could be ready to go but not brilliant. And I think the really awesome thing is when you can paint the picture that you've nailed that brilliance in a sea of nonsense with your tech. So if you fit that, please find me, reach out. LinkedIn, Twitter, email's fine, but I'm less responsive there.
Yeah, that was extremely well said. And Yeah, it's so funny because we connected on Twitter, and then my team forgot to tag you in the post for this event, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe
I know.
that."
I might call you guys out after.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm gonna have to have a
I
talk
think
with them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So my name is a little bit of a joke, making fun of iOS, how it says, maybe,
Yeah.
and then your name to try to suggest who you're like when you get texts and things. So I think because my name is not actually Samara Gordan on Twitter, but it's maybe Samara, that's the benefit of the doubt I'm giving you guys for why I wasn't tagged in that post.
Yeah. And I'm gonna. Yeah, I wish they would have just asked. I wish they would have just asked me too. Oh yeah, Ryan from
All
our
right.
social here. So yeah, next time we'll get that sorted out. Yeah. So no, I think that was great. Final words, and definitely connect with her. She's she's a great follow on Twitter for sure.
Thank you.
Xiao, I'd love to get your final thoughts and where can people find you and reach out.
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat. I guess my final thoughts are, it's not really about us. It's about you guys who are thinking about the great ideas of the future, who are taking the risks, who are putting your lives on pause. I mean, I think it's every day I'm reminded, and it just renews that tremendous respect I have for founders. Right, this whole ecosystem, this whole advancement that we have as civilization, are because people are willing to take incredible risks to do something that could be amazing. And it's tough times now, but if you look back at what happened in 2008 and 2009, people still, stuck their neck out and did really, really amazing things. And that's incredibly hard. And just being part of this like large, cruel funnel of the world, like that's greatness. And that's how we move society forward. And one way I judge kind of even, which countries are better than the other is like how easy it is for someone to make that kind of decision, to take that kind of risk, because almost everything good that's come from life has come from people willing to do that, whether socially, whether in technology, all of that stuff, right? The history of humanity has never been one where all of a sudden we come up with something good and everyone just goes like, okay, cool, we'll do things in a new way that's much better for everyone else. It's every single time it's been one person who was thought was crazy, dragging the rest of the world, kicking and screaming along with them. And half the time we end up killing that motherfucker, right? So it's the founders, it's the people who are willing to take the risk, it's the people willing to do something new, bold. That's you guys. And I certainly wouldn't be here, and my life would be pretty dull if it wasn't for you guys, the founders. And so I would say mad respect to what you guys are doing. My job is to support you guys as much as possible. Please email me if there's something I can do to be helpful. But really, it's gratitude to you guys who are thinking about taking these big risks and for doing it for humanity. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate that, and we appreciate all your insights and everything. I think you're extremely open and candid, which I love. And I mean, you hit right at home with why we're building Entre from the beginning. It's, we believe that if we, build the largest network of entrepreneurs and creators, then we're going to be able to make massive impact in the world. And if we can help people find co-founders, investors, developers, freelancers easier and faster in an ecosystem that supports them, we're going to be able to make massive change and, be able to help people who would never have started a company, start a company, who would never have gotten funding, get funding, and just bringing people together. So I love that. And I love everything that you've been saying. And I've just really enjoyed this conversation so much. So thank you all for being here and being part of this. We're going to jump into breakout sessions now. So for everyone who wants to stay on and meet some of the other attendees, you can turn on your video now, and I'll get us into some breakout rooms here shortly. If there's any, if there's anyone else that has questions, feel free to, reach out to me. I'll drop some more info for Entre. And you can sign up for free at justjoinentre.com for those of you who came in later and don't know about us yet. But for the speakers, thank you guys so much. You guys don't have to stick on for the networking and everything. And stay safe, healthy and everything. And hope you have a great rest of your week and weekend. And take care. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys so much. And thank you for
Thank you,
all of
everyone.
the really thoughtful questions. This was a great conversation.
Thanks. Yeah, no, we appreciate it. And yeah, thanks to Josh and Eagle Point as well for being, making this event possible as well.